remember this.
Stay out of my business. Stay out of my health care.
How in the world are we going to pay for it? And
it's more government, a higher cost, and less choice.
So what makes you think government could run a new health care program?
Incredible. And that was before they passed the law. So now that their worst fears are being realized with a disastrous rollout, is Obamacare the threat to individual freedom that protesters warned it would be? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Rich Carlgard, Sabrina Schaeffer, Mike Ozanian, John Tamny, and joining us for the first time this week, Bruce Japsen. Welcome, Bruce. Thanks for coming on. So, Steve,
Thanks
were the protesters right?
They're absolutely right, both in terms of choice. The government gives you very little choice. We're ending up as a people paying more for less. No reason why a 60-year-old man should have to pay for maternity benefits. So the whole thing is collapsing, both in cost, in terms of choice, in terms of the rollout. It goes against the whole grain of American individualism and free markets, which is turning scarcity into abundance. This has gone the opposite direction of the Soviet Union. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the last I checked.
Well, Bruce, the fact is that going back and listening to the protesters before Obamacare was rolled out, you realize how right some of their concerns were, don't you?
Well, certainly there are people who costs are going to go up because but it's because they're getting a better plan. They're getting essential health benefits that they hadn't had before. But for most people, they're going to get more choices because we got to remember here, they were uninsured. They had no choice before. And I would take issue with the fact that it's not free market because you're having private insurance companies participate. They have a choice whether to participate. And most people are getting at least 2 company choices and several different plans to choose from, which is, if they're uninsured, it's more than they have.
Mike Ozanian, when you hear the phrase better plans, they're going to get better plans, better is in the eyes of the beholder. And in fact, the president has been saying for a long time that the old plans were cut rate and that Senator Tom Harkin called them junk policies. But look at that stat, 69% of all the people polled say they have excellent or good health care. They like their policies, but now they can't keep their policies.
Yeah, for the president to think that he knows better than the people he governs as to what type of plan they should have just shows what contempt this president has for the American people. And if you look at the choices, they're going down because insurers are, the Mayo Clinic, for example, David, most plans don't include that. It's one of the best hospitals in the country. Why? Because Obamacare is restricting costs, so insurers are dropping some of the better hospitals and some of the better doctors are being dropped. So this whole thing really is being sold by someone who lied to the American people for years about what this plan entailed.
Well, Sabrina, the fact is when you put all the protesters' complaints together, and so many of their complaints turned out to be right, the one thing that sticks out is individual choice. That's what really bugs people. When it's concerning their own health care, they think their choices should trump the government, right?
Yeah, because the American people know what's best, and they've taken, the rose-colored glasses have come off. People realize that the only way to truly improve our healthcare system in America is to make sure that more individuals own and control their healthcare dollars. I think Mike is exactly correct on this. If we want to see greater price transparency, more efficiency, and ultimately better care, we have to put individual patients in charge of their healthcare dollars.
Well, Rich Carlgard, Democrats are not the only ones going to get an earful or are getting an earful right now. It's also Republicans. They're going to get an earful from constituents saying, well, what should we do, right? Do they have a plan?
Well, let's hope they have a plan because I think, health care is broken, and it was broken before Obamacare, and it's broken because there has been a lack of pricing transparency. The government has already been too involved, and what we need is this free market revolution, as Steve Forbes likes to point out. In what other part of the economy where you have rising demand is that considered bad? Entrepreneurs can rise and meet this demand in a way I think that can utterly transform healthcare, bring better healthcare, higher quality at lower prices, just as it does with almost everything else.
And John Tamny, again, the issue is choice. People want to be able to choose what they like, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so basic. When government's the main provider, the end result is Bulgarian blue jeans that no one wants to wear. Capitalism.
Bulgarian blue jeans. I forgot about those Bulgarian blue jeans, yeah.
Yeah, they ended the Cold War, whereas capitalism always provides an abundance. And the problem is, as Rich and Steve and Mike and Sabrina have pointed out, is that healthcare has lacked the profit motive for a long time. If you return that to it and remove the government, you'll very quickly see a problem turned into something fairly simple.
And of course, Bruce, it's also the choice not to have insurance. Still, that gets under people's skin. They want that choice.
Well, certainly, but I would take issue with the fact that this is not a free market thing. The health insurance industry is running the show here, not the government. I mean, in the individual market, health insurance companies, I think of WellPoint, for example, they've raised their profit expectations 3 times this year in anticipation of the revenue they're going to get from Obamacare. And so this idea that this is run by the government, I think, is ridiculous.
Well,
it's run by the insurance
they are
companies.
at least telling the insurance companies what they have to do. But at the same time, Steve, Bruce is absolutely right. A lot of these insurers, you look at their stocks, they've been going sky high. Why?
Because it's crony capitalism. If Obamacare is so great, this whole plan is so great, David, why do they have to have a law to make us do it? Why wouldn't we be flocking to it anyway? So the insurers saw this as millions of people being forced to buy their products, and so markets anticipated they're going to get more profits. But it's crony capitalism. It's not free markets.
Well, Mike Ozanian, I'm wondering if the insurers have some doubts now about whether they should have supported Obamacare as they did.
Well, look, they're going to try to get some exemptions. We know the unions are going to try to get exemptions. Everybody's got their hand in the pot. But the reason why we need to go more...
Well, everybody except the average guy.
Well, absolutely. We're going to also support Congress and subsidize them. But the reason why we needed to go to more choice and more free market, if you look at products like LASIK surgery, tooth implants, things that are out of mainstream insurance, David, over the last 20 years, their price has plummeted and the quality has improved dramatically.
Well, that's absolutely true. And, Rich, I'm wondering if doctors are going to be outside of the universe of what covered. That is, a lot of doctors are going to opt just to go cash only, right?
Yeah, and so everything that the administration purports to be against, which is this rising divide between rich and poor, is going to be made worse because Obamacare. But look, can I just say something about this idea of junk plans? You know, I suppose we own a Chrysler minivan, and I suppose if you are selling Rolls Royces, you would consider a Chrysler minivan a junk car. We like it. We can afford it. We're perfectly happy with it.
And Sabrina, again, it's individual choice. Also individual choice of the doctors. Will doctors, I'm wondering if doctors will be free to choose to work outside of these plans. They may be coerced, whether they like it or not, to work inside the plans.
I think that's right. Right, and I think individuals want to be able to work directly with their doctors, and when individuals are the customers, we're going to see a tremendous improvement in our healthcare system. Of course, what they are hearing at the town hall meetings this weekend is that nearly 60% of the country continues to oppose Obamacare. That's more than 10% more than opposed it before the law was implemented. And they're not opposing it because of the disastrous implementation. They're opposing it because suddenly Americans are realizing what healthcare is going to look like when government is running the show, and they don't like it.
Steve, let's end with what we started with. These protests that we saw in 2010, they definitely affected the 2010 midterms. Will we see them come up again as things get worse with Obamacare affecting the 2014 elections?
Absolutely, David, because now goes from an abstraction reality. And one of the things the administration underestimated was health care is the most personal thing possible for you, for your kids, grandkids, relatives, and friends. So when you start messing with that, or you see people you know have their health care messed with, they're going to get aroused. I've seen it with people who supported Obama. They're going to work against the Democrats in 2014.
Don't mess with my health care. That sounds like a slogan. So with the cost of Obamacare still piling up, is that why our economy still isn't taking off? Cashing in adds it all up at the bottom of the hour. But first, right here, it's official. 2013 was the slowest hurricane season in 3 decades. And now some here say that officially proves all those climate change programs are just a waste of money.
The 75th year of the Hunger Games. The tribute is...
The Hunger Games catching fire. It's ruling at the box office. It's all about the power struggle of the all-important Capitol forcing its rules on the masses who live outside the Capitol. And John Tamney, you say there's a lesson here for America. Tell us.
Well, I live in D.C., and I've watched it boom over the last few years while the rest of the U.S. economy is somewhat sagged. And so the parallels to the Hunger Games novels are very clear. But the positive thing is about once a generation, Americans let governments grow too large, the economy naturally suffers, and then we reverse course. I think the fact that we're moving towards the Hunger Games means that we're soon going to reverse it.
Of course, Bruce, some people say that there are things the Capitol does well, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that a lot of people were thinking that we needed to do something with Dodd-Frank after the financial collapse, and that doesn't seem to have hurt any of the banks that we thought we were going to. The stocks are soaring. The Dow's above 16,000. I think there were some additional regulations put in. It doesn't seem to have harmed anybody.
But on the other hand, Rich, that just kind of proves the Hunger Games point, doesn't it? The fact is that there's this elite, this insider elite. They're doing great. They're doing like gangbusters, and the rest of us are just supporting that elite.
Yeah, you know, I agree with John Tamny, but to John's thesis, I would add crony capitalism. The people, you know, this administration in particular makes no secret of the fact that it favors certain kinds of industries, certain kinds of financial institutions, and everybody else is on the outside. The majority of us are on the outside.
Well, Sabrina, I'm pleased that John Tamny is a little optimistic about the future. He says eventually when the Capitol becomes too big, maybe not quite as big as in the Hunger Games, but that eventually Americans wake up and change things. Do you think they're going to do it this time?
Absolutely, and actually, since this is the weekend of Thanksgiving, I want to be a little bit optimistic as well. I don't think that it is a linear, you know, road to serfdom. I think that there is great things about America is that people do speak up, and when government, you know, takes over too much controls, people say it's time to rein it in. And one thing is, you know, everyone doesn't love the Tea Party right now, but nearly a quarter of Americans identify with the Tea Party, whose goal is to rein in government, to rein in the progressive state, and to return government to its proper constitutional role. So that gives me some hope.
Well, Bill, Sabrina just mentioned The Road to Serfdom. That's a great book by Friedrich Hayek, a libertarian book. Are we on that road?
I think we are. It's getting to be a savage, lobbyist world out there where people spend less energy creating wealth than fighting over what's there using their friends in the government. Just one example of that, the drug companies that make expensive asthma inhalers didn't want to see cheap asthma inhalers coming onto the market. They got their friends in the government to declare the cheap asthma inhalers to be an environmental hazard, which is absurd. That's what we're living with in this economy.
And, Steve, you go to Washington, D.C. I grew up in Washington, and I've seen it expand like crazy, particularly as the country is going through some of its worst periods. The restaurants are full. Real estate was never really hurt that much. I mean, the place is booming.
Well, that's right, and some of my best friends are in Washington, but clearly the government's gotten too big. They've wrecked the dollar. They're taking over health care, taking over the banking industry, and that's why we have the worst job creation since the 1930s. The record speaks for itself. They get rich, the country gets poorer.
All right, we're not quite at the Hunger Games yet. Hopefully we'll wake up before that happens. By the way, it is a great movie. I saw it on Sunday. Coming up, you just heard about the Hunger Games, Blockbuster. Now get our Informer's Blockbuster stocks coming right up.
They just have to be brave enough to